Mortimer, I'm going to play a game with you. You play it with me. I'm going to give you a sentence and ask you to state its meaning in your own words.
Right.
And then you do the same to me. This is a statement that Hamlet makes to Horatio in the play Hamlet. Very famous quote, but often misunderstood. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
I would say that Hamlet is saying, your understanding of the world, Horatio, is not adequate. There are more things than you understand.
In other words, you're emphasizing the word your.
Yes,
in that.
your, Horatio's philosophy.
No, it isn't that.
Oh, I see.
There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Oh, he might have said, there are more things in heaven and earth than philosophers can understand.
That's right, because there are ghosts and
the word
spirits and things like that.
Your isn't the personal your.
And philosophy means material philosophy. It means, because Hamlet is throughout that play a materialist.
I see.
As you'll see in a moment.
Well, let me try you on one then.
Right.
In the Middle Ages, the great theologians and the philosophers were very fond of saying again and again, nothing acts except it is actual. What does that mean to you? Say that in your own words now. Nothing acts except it is actual.
It means I can't be hurt by something that is only potential. Unless something actually is, it can't hurt me.
That's something exists, it can't hurt you. Now give me an example of what. Show me that you understand that by giving me a concrete example of something that can't hurt you because it isn't actual.
Well, a possible thunderstorm can't wet me.
Precisely. Next little sentence I'd like to try you on is one of my favorite sentences in Rousseau's Social Contract, where he's referring back to Aristotle's doctrine that some men are by nature slaves. And he says, refers to Aristotle's doctrine, and then he says, about that doctrine, that some men are by nature slaves, Aristotle was right, but he took the effect for the cause.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That is to say, he thought because men act like slaves,
slavishly,
therefore they really are slaves, whereas what Rousseau meant was because they're treated like slaves, they then act like slaves.
In other words, he's charging Aristotle with having confused nature and nurture.
Right.
Aristotle should not have said some men are by nature slaves, but some men are by nurture slaves.
Yeah, that's very good. That's a better way to do it. Finally, two sentences from Hamlet, but they come right together. Hamlet's last words to Horatio. The rest is silence. Hamlet dies. Horatio says, good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. And beautiful, beautiful statement. But can you elucidate the two sentences?
Well, Hamlet is saying, when I'm dead, I'm dead.
Yeah.
No more.
Right.
And Horatio is saying, oh no, sweet prince, there's another world to which you will be escorted by angels.
Yeah, it's kind of not fair because Hamlet is dead and can no longer argue.
Answer.
But in fact, that argument between Hamlet and Horatio runs throughout the play. Hamlet is a materialist. Horatio is a Christian, and who believes in the immortality of the soul. And if you don't catch those key sentences, you don't see the metaphysical argument and the religious argument that's going on throughout the play.
I have one more sentence from you, for you rather. It's from Machiavelli. There are two ways of contesting, of quarreling, differing. There are two ways of contesting, the one by law, the other by force. The first method is proper to men, the second to beasts. But because the first is frequently not sufficient, it is necessary to have recourse to the second. Therefore, it is necessary for a prince to understand how to avail himself of the beast and of the man.
That's a terrible statement, isn't it? It means that we, in the war of life, which we all live, we cannot afford to be wholly human. We also have to be bestial. And what we're doing here, of course, is to find, we first have to find and then elucidate in our own words the key sentences in a book. If we don't do that, we're going to not be able to capture the author's meaning.
I think, particularly in expository books, the author helps us to find his key sentences, and our job is not to find them, but to understand them. I think more often, in the books you've been referring to, in the poetical books, it is more difficult. The author doesn't underline the sentence for you. For example, I have a book here which is recent publication, a book about the environmental crisis, very good book indeed by Barry Commoner, called The Closing Circle. And Commoner does it He does it by, look, Charles, he does it by putting right in the center of the page the first law, the second law.
Right.
Let me read you the 4 laws. Everything is connected to everything else is the first law.
Right.
And the second one is everything must go somewhere. And the third one is nature knows best. And the fourth one is there is no such thing as a free lunch. Now those again, the reader can't possibly miss the sentences. But that's not enough. In fact, they're elliptical. They're tantalizing. What does he mean by everything? There's no such thing as a free lunch,
right,
as a basic law of nature.
Yeah, and part of the pointing to the key sentence on the part of the author is this tantalizing quality.
Precisely.
Yeah, he wants to engage your attention, to make you ask a question and wonder what he means.
And I think it's very successful because since you are caught, perplexed by those elliptical and enigmatic sentences, you then read very carefully to find out why he says there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
Other authors do it somewhat differently. For example, in the Middle Ages, one of the great works in the 13th century is Aquinas' Summa Theologica, which is voluminous. And yet it's divided into hundreds and hundreds of questions. And each question being asked, the author points out his answer. He always begins by giving you the wrong answer first.
Right.
Say objection 1, objection 2, and that signals that he's giving you the wrong answer. And then when he finishes with the wrong answers, he says, on the contrary, I answer that. Now, you can't miss his sentence because he said, now, having told you what the wrong answers are, I'm going to tell you what the right answer is, and he lays it out. But again, finding the key sentence in this case is easy because the author's helped you to find it. Then the challenge to you, or the task for you, is to understand it. And what we did at the beginning, then, that little game we played, I think illustrates what must be done to understand it. You've got this, let me go back a moment and say something else, Charles. I used to give oral examinations at St. John's in Chicago, and one of the reasons why an oral examination is so much better than a written examination is the professor can never, in a written examination, say to the student, what did you mean by these words? But in an oral examination, the student often repeats words he's read in the book. And you say, now, Mr. Jones, what you just said is exactly what Hobbes said, or what Darwin or Locke said. Now tell me in your own words what Locke or Hobbes or Darwin meant. And then the student who's remembered the words perfectly can't tell you in his own words.
No.
And you know he hasn't understood the sentence.
Right, he's just memorized.
Or sometimes he actually can do it. And then you say, that's very good, Mr. Jones, but now give me a concrete example of it.
Yeah.
And he fails to do that. Now, those are the 2 tests I've always used to be sure the student really grasped the meaning of the key sentence.
You talk about students, but this is in fact what every reader, every good reader has to do.
All of my students, by the way, are readers.
Yeah, well,
they wouldn't be students unless they were.
A student is a reader. Yeah. The examples you've been giving there in this kind of test is particularly good for expository works, works of philosophy, history, and so forth. But poets, dramatists, have different ways of pointing out the key sentences or the key statements in their works. In Macbeth, for example, there's a marvelous interchange. My father always used to remind me of this. King Duncan comes in, and he's just had to execute the Thane of Cawdor, who was a traitor. And he says of him, "There's no art to tell the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust." That's a nice statement. He's expressing his regret about the treachery of the previous Thane of Cawdor. The next statement in the play is, "Enter Macbeth." And in fact, Macbeth enters upon that line. That's his entrance line. And, well, of course, within 24 hours, he has murdered Duncan himself. He was a man in whom Duncan had an absolute trust, but a man who betrayed him much more terribly than the Thane of Cawdor ever did.
There the sentence is a dramatic confrontation.
Right. And you understand that that's what the play is really about, because Macbeth at the beginning of that play is a man in whom one can have an absolute trust, but the corruption of Macbeth, the lessening of his trustworthiness is the course of the action. Now, a lyric poet does this even differently. He does not have the device of dramatic action, so he has to do it in words, and the sound of words becomes very important. There's a famous example in Milton's Lycidas, which, among other things, yeah, everybody read it in high school, but not everybody reads it as carefully as they should. There's among other things, this poem is about the clergy. The corrupt clergy on the one hand, and the honest and devout clergy on the other hand, because Lycidas stands for a friend. This is a poem about a friend of Milton's who died when he was very young, and he would have been a good clergyman instead of a bad one. And in referring to the bad ones, Milton talks about their sermons. And he talks about the way the people listen. And when they list, their lean and flashy songs, that is, of the corrupt clergy, grate on their scrannel pipes of wretched straw. And that's
Grate, G-R-A-T-E?
Yeah, as though you were grating cheese. And the noise, the sound, the words that they say grate on their minds, and they are of no worth to them. On the other hand, when Milton finally talks about Lycidas himself, who is his friend, he says, and when he goes to heaven, he will hear the unexpressive nuptial song in the blessed kingdoms meek of joy and love. There entertain him all the saints above in solemn troops and sweet societies. And the difference in sound between in solemn troops and sweet societies
and
grate on their scrannel pipes of wretched straw is an expression.
Those are hard words. Grate on their scrannelled pipes.
Scrannel pipes. Nobody knows quite what that word means. He may have even made up the word.
But the sound is, you're quite right. The contrasting sounds, they do it.
The contrasting sounds indicate the contrasting moral conditions. And if you don't get that contrast, if you don't catch it, you have not really understood one of the main themes of Lycidas.
You know, Charles, this attention we've been paying here to sentences is secondary in a sense, because the first thing you have to do is catch the important words.
Yeah, come to terms.
Yeah. And those important words often occur in the important sentences. In the case of the words, it's really getting their meaning. In the case of the sentences, understanding what's being said. And so that you've got a second level of interpretation here.
Right.
Words, or terms, sentences, propositions, really.
Right.
And then, of course, there's still a third level, namely the level of the sequence of sentences, the sentences in the book that put together, hanging together in a sequence, form a whole coherent argument, whether it be a book of poetry or an expository book.
Right. And if you fail to do that, if you fail to identify the terms and then the key sentences and then put them together in a sequence, you have failed really to understand the book.